I am Saima Zaidi, additional curator here. For our 10th event, titled A Tale of Two Cities, The Cultures of Uch Sharif and the Sohrawardi Legacy of Multan, we have three outstanding academics and practitioners with us. Tanvir Hasan, Yasmin Cheema, and Hasan Ali Khan. Ms. Tanvir Hasan is an architect based in London and was educated in Egypt and the UK. She's been involved in the conservation of several esteemed heritage projects, which include royal palaces, the House of Parliament, and the regeneration of the Regent Street, to name a few. Ms. Yasmin Cheema is a pioneer in conservation architecture in Pakistan. She has taught at several educational institutions and imparted her knowledge very generously. We're looking at the National College of Farsalho, Dawood University of Engineering and Technology, Karachi, and the Bill Clinton University in Turkey. Furthermore, she is also reviewer for the World Monument Fund. Finally, Hasan Ali Khan. He's a historian, and his acclaimed book, Constructing Islam on the Indus, The Material History of the Sohrawardi Sufi Order between 1200 and 1500 CE, was published in 2016 by the Cambridge University Press. His forthcoming book, Religious Diversity in Pakistan, is being published by Oxford and actually this year. Each one of our speakers will be first presenting their work, followed by a conversation between them, moderated by Ms. Tanvir Hasan. Ms. Hasan, please.
So I just wanted to say thank you all for coming tonight, and I see that I am the first speaker. But I'm a bit of an interloper today because what I want to discuss is perhaps a bit of a tangent to the real story of the city of Uch and its people and its monument, which will be covered by Yasmin and Hasan. The buildings we will be discussing are largely these three monuments you see in front of you. And these buildings raise a point about preserving built heritage and why we do it. And this is what I would like to discuss today. The question is, why do we feel that we should look after and preserve old buildings? To me, it's because it gives us a sense of history, a sense of legitimacy, and it adds to our feeling of belonging to the space where we exist. So, importance about what we keep and about history is so intrinsic to our needs that new cities like Dubai invent historic quarters, which they didn't have before, simply because there's a need for them. So in a place like ours, a country like ours, where we already have so many, perhaps we should look after them a little bit more compassionately. Uch, let me just see if I can get this to work. And you can see the city we're talking about is Uch, which is here, but the area that will be covered in the buildings I'm talking about today is much larger. And it covers this sort of region, sort of from Dera Ismail Khan across to a little bit of Balochistan. Because this is the area in which the building typology that the tombs of Uch sort of connect to is spread. Uch itself, as you can see, is now a big sprawling city on top of an ancient mound. Is divided into two Sufi silsilas. One is the Bukhari and one is the Gilani. And I'm sure Hasan will tell you a lot more about it. The buildings we are talking about are in this little quarter, and Yasmin will be discussing in more detail the whole process of conserving buildings, which are located on a mound that is also sliding downhill. So the question is, what is special about the buildings of Uch? And the buildings of Uch are part of a much wider typology, and it stretches from Multan to Sitpur and across in the north to Lalmara in Dera Ismail Khan. On the left you have the tomb of Rukn Alam, which everybody knows, which is 14th century. And on the right you have a much later version, 15th, 16th century, which is the tomb of Tahir Nahar in Sitpur. And the buildings of Uch lie in between, chronologically in between these two buildings. So the shift from a building that has a largely brick decorative terracottas to a building that is completely covered in tile work is where we are heading in this development or evolution of the building typology. When we talk about heritage and we talk about what we preserve in buildings, we talk about heritage significance, or people refer to it as heritage value. And here I must clarify that the mausolea we are talking about are actually ruins. They are, the typology is either in a ruinous state or it is used as mausoleum. So it's being used for the purpose to which it was originally designated. Therefore, what is significant in it is what we need to talk about. The assessment of heritage significance enables us to understand what is important from a heritage point of view, allowing us to distinguish between monuments which should be conserved as a museumological object to monuments which can be inhabited and lived in, but which still retain their value and they're not so damaged to the extent that they become pointless. Returning to the monuments of Uch, this is what we are discussing today, and these three buildings are attributed to three people: Bibi Javandi, which is this tomb, the tomb of Bahar Halim, which is that, and the third one, the tomb of Ustad, which is not on this picture. The buildings are dated through stylistic comparison. The form is an octagon with circular bastion and 3 stories. It is dated largely with reference to the tomb of Rukn Alam, which is 1325 or the first quarter of the 14th century, and that is it. And the rest is based on the basis of stylistic comparison and also understanding of the glazing technology of the tile work, which we will come to later. It is assumed the tomb of Bahar Halim was the earliest, then Bibi Javandi came following, and then the tomb of the Ustad, all dated to the late 15th century, to the end of the 1400s. The name of these personalities associated with the mausoleum come down to us through oral history. The tombs do not have any inscription, and there is nothing indicating that they actually belong to the people with whom they are now, or with whom they have now become associated. So we have given these buildings dates and times and attributed them to individuals. We have no evidence of this. However, the form itself is very important from our architectural understanding of the building, and more importantly is the decorative program and the technology that goes into decorating these brickworks. And therefore, it is through our understanding and appreciation of this program and the form of the building that we give it significance. The buildings, the decorative technology that is used to articulate the exterior of these buildings is embedded in an earlier tradition of brickwork. So as you can see, the tiles are not surface mounted, they are deep brick, which are then embedded into the surface of the structure. So you basically build an external facade alongside your internal, alongside your main structural elements. And this is integral to the building. You understand it and you lay it out the moment you start construction. And this sophisticated decorative technique is both on the inside and the outside. On the right is the tomb of, on my right is the tomb of, interior of the tomb of Bahar Halim, and on the left is the tomb of Bibi Javandi. And although Bahaul Halim, which is on the right, is supposed to be earlier than the Bibi Javandi, which is on the left, there is no reason for us to accept this. The sophistication of the decorative technique is not limited just to the tile work, and you can see this glorious interior, but also the timber decorative features, as you can see. So by the time the builders came to do this building, they really knew what they were doing, and there was, we believe, a much greater understanding. It was not just paint on paper. There must have been a deeper reason why the motifs that are used where they are used. So we all architectural historians look for precedents. And in the case of the subcontinent, we quite frequently look at precedents outside the subcontinent, because, of course, Islam came from outside. Well, that's not necessarily true, although the two buildings you have on the screen now are, one is Central Asia and one is Iran. But this is, again, they are similar to the buildings that we are looking at, similar to the typology. In Pakistan, however, we have our own earlier buildings, and these are tombs in Haran. They are very interesting. I didn't really have the correct slides, apologies, but some of these actually are ossuaries. So we're beginning to have a kind of typology of mausolea that is mixing Islam with non-Islamic traditions, because the lower part of these buildings are for burial, and the upper part, in some cases, just have a sarcophagus. In some cases, they have ossuaries, basically places where bones are kept. It is assumed that they come from a tradition of either Zoroastrianism or other local. They are decorated with quite elaborate terracotta motifs on the outside, and we would like to think that these motifs all have a meaning. They're not just there for beautification. Similar to the tombs of Haran, Balochistan, are these tombs in Dera Ismail Khan. This is Lal Mara, and this is the earliest glazed tombs that we have. This is one of the earliest glazed technology that we have. It's quite crude, it's rough, but it is the earliest. Nobody's analyzed it, we haven't done any thermoluminescence, so we really don't know what the date of it is. But we know that by the time we come to the Lal Mala tomb, and they are usually dated to the 12th and 13th century, which is the end of the Ghurid period and the beginning of the Sultanate, we already have quite a sophisticated, relatively early stages of technology. In the same batch of tombs is the tomb of Shah Seddin, which is again attributed to the Ghaznavid, the end of the Ghurid period, which is the 13th century. And this is a very interesting tomb because, as I said, we now have a tradition of tombs where you have Muslims and non-Islamic traditions. This is the tomb of Shaitan Sharif, and please forgive me if you can't see, but if you see on this side, we have a very, very clear Quranic inscription, Allah at the bottom, and then Surah Al-Fatiha and all of that. And on the southern face, we have nothing. We have, instead of having this Quranic inscription, we have a decorative motif. Instead of having Surah Al-Fatiha, we have this motif, which some people have said is Lillah, but I don't believe that that is true. And you don't have the Allah at the bottom. What's going on? I don't know. Why on the southern face we suddenly stopped putting Quranic verses? I don't know. But I think there is more to it than just happen chance. In the 15th century, there was a sort of a technological flourishing all over the Indian subcontinent. And everybody suddenly started making glazed tiles. These tiles are from Bengal. This is the Gumti Darwaza, again 15th century, so Bengali Sultanate. But as you can see, the technology and the type of glazing is actually very, very different. And at the same time, in the 15th century in Hyderabad, in Bidar, we have these tombs which are coming up, and the madrasa. Again, very different type of tile work, but tile work indeed still. Again, unlike Iran, where they do their tiles on frit, and therefore the glaze sticks much better, these are all baked on terracotta and to lower temperatures, so all the glazing falls off. This is one of our problems. The Mughals, when they come in, do not use any of this tile work. They import a completely different technology, which is this Kurdesaka tile. They then give it all up and use cut tile work. But as you can see, this is from Kashmir, and this is 17th century. So there is, I'm saying this because I'm sort of saying that in these buildings of Uch and Multan, there is a local traditional expression which is embedded in a decorative program peculiar to this part of the world, both in terms of the choice of color and in terms of choice of the decorative motif. It is also proved to evidence to us that we had a very sophisticated pottery tradition, because we have people making these, big bowls on the top here. These wonderful petals, these quite elaborate bird cages. Why you'd want to put a bird thing on a tomb, I don't know, but the fact that you had a potter who could produce these means that we have a pottery tradition which we know nothing about. This is even more evidence of this objects, which are pottery objects which are being made. And quite sophisticated, this is a tomb of Rajan Shah Laya, which is 16th, 17th century, and again you have quite beautiful designs on the tile work. We have no pottery in the subcontinent. Somehow or the other, we seem to have not made pots. This is the earliest pottery we have. On the left is, these are from 7th, 8th century Iraq. On the left is the one in the museum in Karachi. And on the right is the one in a museum in the, it's a bit museum. So they are of the same period. So I think we knew pots existed. It's just that we never really looked at it. And therefore, one of the significances of these tombs is the tiles, the form, and the glazing technology. And if we do this to it, which is restore it to the extent where we remove the original tile and we replace it with new, we have reduced the significance of that building. And this is really what heritage is about. This was Baha'ul Halim as we found it in 1986. This is Baha'ul Halim restored by is it the Archaeology Department, Yasmin? Archaeology. So there is no evidence for any of this, as you can see. There is no evidence for any of this decorative motif that's been added. We don't know how high this is. We don't know if this is what the top looked like. We don't know any of it. It's all make-believe. And in the process, we have lost what was there. Therefore, we can't even go back to it. Similarly, this is Lal Mara. So this is the tomb as it was. And this is what the Archaeology Department has. And they have removed every single glazed tile from the building and replaced it with new. And I leave you, I think, that's it. I leave you with this question of, do we really have the tools to understand the significance of heritage? Yes, we do, except that we don't put it together. And therefore, in the process, I think we lose a lot of valuable information and knowledge, which we really should be assembling together. Thank you. And now I'll ask Yasmin to come and talk about her.
It's like Tanvir said that, can we save our heritage? What are you doing with the heritage? So I spent 30 years of my life with my team in Uch Sharif, and we tried to do a sustainable development of the built heritage, which included the city and the monuments. Basically, we built these tomb complex. To CRC, I was the honorary chairperson, and we had about 8 board members. We registered well, I wasn't here, I was actually in Karachi, when this happened. Some of my friends, insisted that I'd done a thesis and we should implement it. And they registered CRC as under the Societies Act. And in 1998, GRC received $80,000 from American Express through the Old Man Fund, and it was also put on the 100 more endangered site. So basically then in 1998, we established office in Uch. I think you probably have read this, it's on the invitation. The works carried in Uch were based on my thesis, which was a methodology of conservation and recognition of the symbiotic relationship between the monument and revitalization of the city through community participation. Because, we worked with Arif very closely, and, he always told us to, kind of think of the community, and what happens if the monuments, you save the monuments and the community doesn't do anything. So the other thing we did was that the monument interventions were based on a very scientific and technical inspection and intensive laboratory tests. The intervention guaranteed the lifespan of the monument is lengthened and at the same time saved their authenticity and integrity. So next, I don't know what's happened to them. Well, there was a map of which has disappeared. Can we do something about it? Okay. Oh, here it is. Saima's playing with me. This is, Uch Bukhari and Uch Gilani, and in the heart of Uch is the Mela ground. And the yellow you see are the traditional bazaar. So this is very important, They are Sunnis and Shias. One Pir is Sunni and one is Shia. And there's a special lot of Ismailis also living in Uch. It's too fancy for me, actually. Now, there are a lot of issues which are confronting issue. Uch Sharif, and when will they come? Saima? Okay, issues of governance, institutional failure, the breakdown of municipality management, absence investment in infrastructure, often with long gaps, environmental degradation, grossly inadequate infrastructure of water supply, sewerage, street light, and encroachment of drains and blockages leading to waterlogging, urban decay. No, basically, these are all these issues which we found. And as Arif Hasan first visited Uch, he said, there has to be a Ganda Talab, and there has to be a overhead with lizards. We hadn't seen that before, then we went and saw them. I'm sorry I don't have a slide of either of the two. And of course this problem of solid waste which is everywhere in Pakistan. And of course the city is ridden with poverty. Tumne kya kiya? Outer migration. Okay. Sita. No, we want to go. Yes, I want to go to Goa. Well, the city is growing rapidly, the direction. Most of the Gilanis have most of the land around the city. But the poor Bukharis just have the Mela ground. No, I have said that. Okay. Next. Now, in 1999, we surveyed, when we talked to World Monument Fund, we said that we want to do the plan for the conservation of the monuments, but we also want to map the city. For city mapping, we kind of correlate the city and people with the monuments. So in 1991, the city was mapped, land use map. Actually, the land use plan was very interesting because the boys came to my office in Lahore and they could point out the houses of each of the house owners, in this map. And then we did a kind of a mapping of heritage sites. And the sanitation plan was developed by OPP RTI. And of course, Arif helped us connect them. And this was sewerage plan which was made. And so let's go on. These are some of the meetings with the community. And OPP RTI came and trained the community of mobilizers. And here, we're presenting the master plan to the Nazim of the city. Well, basically, when I forget the name of the gentleman, but this is what the streets looked like. Can I have a pointer? This was done on OPP model, There's a manager of the street. The boys would make an estimate of how much money would be spent, and they wouldn't touch the money. And then the manager would go and buy all the material, and the community helped, in constructing these things. And here a sanitation plant was constructed, and OPP paraprofessionals asked to supervise that by the government. And these are various same kind of stuff. Can we go on? Well, this is a master plan which we made. The Corps Commander, it was of course Musharraf's regime, the Corps Commander Bhavpur Hasan. Can we go on to the next one? The custodian of these monuments were ASI before partition. And after that they went to Dome, that's the Department of Archaeology Museum, which is a federal department. In 2010, after the devolution, this handed over to the Director General of Archaeology, Punjab. Basically, CRC's conservation strategies are the main aim of conservation of a heritage monument is to preserve the work of original builder for both present and future generations, which was taught by a professor at Metu called Jawahar. He said, when you look at an old building, remember you're not making a new building. So you have to respect what the original architect or builders did. In respect for its significant association, meaning, and to retain the authenticity and integrity of the monuments. The approach to conservation of BB in the complex by CRC was to address the fact of uniqueness as artistic and architectural objects, individual as well as a group. The intervention could be based on scientific course. It would consist of analytic drawings and lab tests. Analytic drawings. Well, basically, you have to have immaculate drawings. When we mapping, measuring these buildings in the initial time, we didn't have the laser scanner. So we had to do it manually and had to be done very thoroughly. And luckily for us, we had a person called Fawad Raza who was working with us, who spent a whole year in Uch, and he would, the drawings were made by hand and they were scanned and then he would digitize them. The mapping of materials type, this we can forget because we're going to talk about later about all this later on. Well, then can you go on to the next one, please? The next one. Well, this is, there's a hujra in this, on this site as well, which, was demolished before we got them. This is when I was doing my thesis in 1894, I think. And the hujra was there, and it was allowed to collapse because the dome people didn't think it was important. I think it's very important, and Hasan will be talking about it later. Well, this is what the site looked like when I first visited the Dubijo and these two. And this is a very old photograph of this. And unfortunately, what happened was that the Oka people built this wall, retaining wall. Of course, they did it because they thought they were consolidating the tomb. But actually, what happened is that because of this infill, we couldn't construct the thing. We would have constructed the thing, but of course, we would have used tiles which were made by designs were made by modern painters. Let's go on to the next one. This is basically a drawing of the topology of land, and this is the highest point, and then this is, the lowest point. And no, this is the lowest at this. And actually, Tanvir, I think that Bhavan Alim comes later than Bijo, and we can talk about it later. So let's go. While I had a borehole while I was doing my thesis, and we found sheds, and we found small bricks underneath the soil. And I think some serious investigation has to be done about it. We may find a Babri Masjid and then make a mandir over it. Well, these are kind of tests which were done by this is actually the problems of the site, and we had the soil tested, and there were a lot of soluble soils in the mud beneath the building. This was done by Jonathan Bell, who's now the project director of World Monify, and Hassan Bokeh, who was the head of the laboratory. He was assistant in the laboratory of building sciences. So let's go on to the next one. Now this is, what we do. This is how you measure them. And then, I told Fuad one day, I said, Fuad, can't we do something that we can get some kind of more accurate drawings, and we don't have to measure every tile and every tile and every brick. And he said, give me 3 days. And then what he did was he photo-rectified the thing, which is this thing here. And this is what we call weathering forms. This one here. Okay, no? This is what we call weathering forms, and this is a mapping of the materials used. And based on this, then we go and do laboratory tests. Can we go on to the next one? Now, basically, we think that this has a place value because people go there and feel there's a force, motive and experience and wonder value, age value, historical value, which can also be called significance. And it has education value because I'll show you some. I hope the slides are still there, and then I can tell you what the education value is. Of course, they are architecturally unique, and education values come twice. And according to Hasan's book, this is archetype of multi-faith, Soorwardi funerary structure in the Indus, rarity and global value. Now, these were the tests which were done by Hassan Bokeh and physical properties, water absorption tests, intervention material, cement, mineral composition. Because this, the mud or earth in Uch has ellatite and elabite in it, it is very workable, It's easy, you don't have to mix anything, you can use the mud as as it is. It was used in the bricks, and it's used in the modern bricks now. And so basically in the mortar there's about 4.5% soluble salt. Solid soluble salts are very dangerous, but it needs a lot of explaining, so I'll leave that. Now when Hassan Bokeh and Jonathan Bell tried to find out the composition of the lime, they put it into hydrochloric acid, and 90% of the lime content was dissolved. And they said there's some rivers in Turkey which have similar kind of composition in riverbeds, So, but of course, the whole thing changed later on. Can we go on to the next one? This is what we call the restitution. And what we do, we'll map the changes in the building, and then we compare. This is part of my thesis which I did, and then we used the same thing later on. We compare these buildings with several buildings with the elements in the building itself, buildings of the same type, the buildings of the same area, and then we try to find out what authentic is. The dark is authentic. We can kind of change, restore it if we want to, which I of course didn't believe it, because I thought that the new tiles composition could be different. And this is of course, we totally, we don't know what the form is, because every monument had a different pinnacle. Shall we go on to the next one? This is what we got the damage categories. The black, the brown over here is the darkest, which means that these tiles which have been used, and especially on the northern side, there was an alkali between the biscuit and the glaze, which meant that if we try to dry it, the glaze would come off. So they hadn't found any solution to this problem when we were working on it. Maybe they found it now, maybe in Italy, maybe in Turkey. So we go on to the next one. So at that point, we had a technical workshop in which we basically wanted to ask our proposal for conservation, the methodology we were using is correct. And more important for us was the rectification of electrified photography which Fawad has used. And we came up with a solution like this for Ustad, and we kept wondering what to do with this. Because this has got mud mortar, and mud mortar has mud flow when it rains. And slowly the bricks come down. Let's go on to the next one. Well, we got another 2 grants from the World Monument Fund. What was the one? Was an MX grant of 100,000. This is in 2001. And then we got another grant, which is Robert Wilson Challenge Grant, which was, I think, $140,000. Now this fellow, Robert Wilson, he makes shoes, and he's a Jew, and he doesn't meet anyone. And you have to send him the projects, and he just decides. Somehow he liked our work, and so he gave us this. And it's 1-to-1 if you raise the money from Pakistani donors, 1-to-2 when you have to do it with the government. So we started to do emergency works, which is several things we had. In Helcro, Pakistan, Abbas Hassan was the CEO then. I asked him to do this work on cost and send someone across to work on it.
Okay, I'll start with a brief note on the history of this Ouch and Multan. Multan actually precedes Ouch as the center for the Sohrawardi order. It's Zenith. And Muhammad bin Tughlaq, who had the second biggest empire in the subcontinent after literally as big as Aurangzeb, ruled between 1325 and 1351, completely suppressed the Sohrawardi order in Multan because they were at loggerheads, and after Shah Rukh ne Alam, who was the Sheikh al-Islam, Bahauddin Zakaria's grandson, in a death in 1335's Common Era, had his nephew and successor Sheikh Khud executed. So the center moved from Multan to Uch, and there Jalaluddin Surkhposh, who was the main spearhead of the Sohrawardi order in Uch, 100 years previous, down the time of Zakaria, his grandsons Jahanian, Jahangasht and Sayyid Raju also had problems with the same ruler. So Uch became the Sohrawardi center after the imperial state, the Toghlaq dynasty, suppressed the Sohrawardi order. So we are working in reverse order in a way, but we'll go back to Multan. And this whole thing is like a story because it's the story of my doctoral fieldwork and Yasmin Cheema, so I'll tell it like a story. Okay, so in March 2006, I was with Yasmin Cheema's help measuring the Bibi Javandi Mound, the complex, tomb complex. And of course, I was totally facilitated by her because I had never been to Uch, and her office, her boys, so to speak, from Uch, were with me. And we came across a bit of intuitive work there, pentagram site plan on the mound. And we were measuring the sides, so it was slightly crooked. If you see, I should hurry actually. There's A dash, so the dashes are actually the thing we measured, and then we tried to recreate the original pentagram. So, but there was one monument missing here. The site is cut off here from the 1870 floods, and just at the corner, I needed a fifth point. So I called Yasmin Cheema. I said, Yasmin Auntie, I found something really remarkable, but I need a fifth monument because three monuments that my colleagues, peers I should say, have spoken about, D, B, and C. So this is Bibi Javandi, that is that's Nouria, I think, and that's Bahad Halim. And we know that there was a monument there, but there was a monument missing there. And I said, can I work with that conjecture? I mean that assessment that there was a fifth monument. She said, yes, I can confirm that for you. Because the floods cut the site, and we have found remains, debris from a fifth monument along with certain sarcophaguses, so you may work with that assumption. And that kick-started the whole thing. We had a pentagram here. And once we had this, I could kind of make sense of the various symbols and diagrams found on the monuments of Uch and Multan. The pentagram, we measured it to be the diameter 170 feet, and after site depreciation and many hundreds of years, that half of that would be 85 feet. So it was still 83 feet. And so we started, putting things together. These are symbols of various religions that are found on the monuments of Uch in that complex. And all of them, they are from Abrahamic religions mostly, but some of them are also from Indo-Iranian religions. For example, you have the swastika here, you have the Dharma Chakra, you have the symbol for Mars. All of these monument symbols belong to either the Sun or Mars as planets, which was seemed not to be a coincidence to me. So that's the Latin crosses again, and the hexagrams from the Surkhposh Khanqa and then from Bibi Javandi. This is the interior of the Surkhposh Khanqa, and you have still use of these, which is not common practice in this country, ceremonial use of the crosses with those oil lamps there for fulfillment of desires. So obviously something is still stuck in the mindset of the locals of their, multi-faith or religiously pluralistic path. Okay. Now there was something else that was happening here, to touch upon my colleagues' work. All these monuments had a major southern axis. That is, the major axis, the entrance to these monuments was from the south, which should not be the case, because in Islamic buildings in our part of the world, the major axis is from the east, as Mecca faces west. So we have three different kinds of historical models for mosques in Islam. One was the Mosque of the Prophet with lots of columns inside, hypostyle, it's called the mosque. But as congregations grew larger, Muslims needed newer kinds of mosques. So in the Levant and Egypt, they adapted the model of the church with the central chamber and two apses on the side, like you have in the Great Mosque of Damascus. And the most profusely used model, later model, was called the Four-Ivan Mosque, which was based on a Zoroastrian fire temple, which is basically a central chamber with smaller rooms on the side, which become entrances and enlarge the space. And the Four-Ivan model is the most profusely used one. But this archetype was not fitting this any of the models used in the construction of religious buildings. So then we had to somehow classify and analyze these monuments. So when I was in architecture school, I had a professor called Delbert Hylands. This is him, he's passed away, maybe he is. He affected my thinking quite a lot. He was a very famous architect, company made 500 hospitals in the US, became very rich, then had a spiritual calling, gave up on everything, and started traveling in the Middle East. And he started examining architecture as a mental process before in the study of architecture of various religions. And his hypothesis was very simply that there's a divine axis in every religion. For example, in Islam, there is a divine axis which is based on Mecca. And when you traditionally go to a mosque, you enter it from the Mecca-facing direction. Mecca is the center of all things. When you leave, your back faces Mecca, which means Islam will take over the world from Mecca, which is what traditionally Muslims believe. He compared that to the symbolism of the Jewish synagogue. And so if you go to a synagogue, the synagogue also faces Jerusalem like mosques face Mecca. But in the case of mosque, you enter from behind facing Mecca, which is the ideology of Islam, etc. In the case of a synagogue, you're facing Jerusalem, but you go and you turn around and your back faces Jerusalem and you enter the synagogue with your back facing Jerusalem, which signifies the diaspora. You go inside, you turn around again for the congregation, and you face Jerusalem, which is the return, which is what is happening in Israel now. And when you leave a synagogue, you are actually facing Jerusalem, as opposed to us looking the other way. So he, in his opinion, this was central to, a divine access to the creation of architecture of any religion. And he, of course, explained it in a very good way. And for example, Christianity, all traditionally Catholic graves and churches face east. The sun, the Messiah is supposed to, Jesus will come from the east. Hinduism has a north-south direction depending on their burial axis. Zoroastrianism historically also had such an axis. So for that reason, I used Hylands' hypothesis pretty successfully to be able to classify these buildings, and these buildings are not classified. So this is the monument of Shah Rukh Alam that Tanvir did touch on in Multan, and in it you'll also see the same thing. The main entrance is here. There's a northern entrance, and there's a lesser eastern entrance, and that's the mihrab. If this were the traditional building, this main access should be from here, but it's not. So there's obviously something else going on. Okay. And then we had the same kind of symbols belong to various religions, but not as profusely used, because this is a bit older than those monuments. This is the mihrab of Shah Rukh Alam. That is a hexagram, and it had certain writings on it. The details are in my book, so I don't have much time. In fact, I have to hurry because I think we're running late. And if you move forward, this is an analysis of the medallions inside the tomb chamber all of which are the same. They are either hexagrams or they're double pentagrams connected to the sun and Mars. And what this signifies, I'll do it in the sum up. Okay. Finally, this is the mausoleum of the mother of a much later Sohrawardi Sufi in Multan, Sultan Ali Akbar, and that is his own mausoleum. And they too are looking south, as you can see. And what's important about this is that the architects, for the very rarely do we find medieval or early modern architecture in this part of the world, the name of the architects inscribed on a building. But the architects here left their seal. It was Rajab Ali and Sons of Lahore who were royal architects for the court of Akbar. And Akbar might also have had something to do with it. Now there's something very interesting here. If you see this, these are graves. Correct? So when we are buried in Islam, this is the body, this is the Mecca axis. You get up, turn right and walk. That's how it's supposed to be on the Day of Judgment. So these graves should actually be straight, so you can get up and walk to Mecca, because that is the west. Somebody actually went, after hundreds of years, with a Mecca compass and measured the grave and oriented it towards Mecca, which means all these monuments, these two at least, this is by, I've told Yasmin auntie, we need to go back and check the mihrabs. These monuments are facing Jerusalem. They are not facing Mecca. Because Multan is, the latitude is 30 degrees, 30.1. Jerusalem is 31 degrees, Mecca is 22. So these are facing Mecca. So for hundreds of years, people are probably burying the deceased facing Jerusalem, because Pir Sahib made a mistake with the architecture or something. But there's no chance for error here, because Islamic astrolabe sciences from the 8th century onwards in the Abbasid era gave you the decimal point for Mecca, because as Muslims expanded, and you know, especially people who went in ships, etc., they needed to know where the Mecca direction is. So this was done on purpose, by design. What the reason is, we don't know, but I'll just try to sum it up. Do I have 3 minutes? Just to... Okay, hold on. So what we have is a distinct, complete archetypical monument, which is not based on imported Muslim models. This is the first presentation I've done in which we were prepped for it 2 days ago with Saima Zaidi, but I'm glad she did it, because a lot of common things came out between all three of us. And just like Tanvir said, there is, so we have a main south-facing axis. We spoke to Tanvir about this. Now I thought that this south-facing axis is only in the archetypal Sohrawardi monument, but she has observed that it's actually present in Mughal architecture. And this is, most Islamic buildings are not built in the subcontinent, if what she says is right, which I'm sure she does, in the traditional Islamic model. So we can talk about this later. So you have a main south axis, you have a northern axis entrance, you have an eastern lesser entrance, and you have, in the case of two buildings, a mihrab facing Jerusalem instead of Mecca. So there was quite a lot of collaboration. I have done the history of the order with Ismailis in the early era, and they were probably the progenitors of this kind of religious syncretism based on a certain principle, which I'll get to. But essentially, this seems to be a building type used by various religions who belong to the congregation of that Sufi order, which is multi-religious, of course. And each religion goes and enters the monument for the reasons of ritual purity, let's just say, of their characteristic religious divine axis direction. So from the east, you would have the Muslims, the Zoroastrians, the Jews, etc. All these populations existed here because after the Mongol invasions, according to Andrew Wink, who I met at Dr. Asma Ibrahim's house a decade ago, 1/3 of at least the population of the Indus Valley, 1 in 3 people was a foreigner because of the Mongol invasion. So every kind of person, well, everything was destroyed except India and Egypt at the other end. And so we had a fundamental shift in the demographics, so it's sustainable to argue that these denominations existed here in large numbers, and they used this according to... Now, the only confirmation I have on this is from a person who helped me in my PhD, Zahir Muir. She was Ismaili, and she has observed the use from the north by Hindus, which is their characteristic axis. Okay, I'm finishing off. Okay, and so essentially, I mean, from what I've been able to read, the south axis was used by the Pir, the Sheikh, the Sufi master. Just to sum up, or maybe once I've redone this book for Hamida Khunsa, when it's out and we do a book launch, I can actually explain the other aspects of it, of what this really is. The whole Sun and Mars nexus is essentially Nowruz. And basically it's the connection of the Vilayat of Ali ibn Abi Talib to that, and the ritual construction of buildings as a testament to the spiritual lineage of that Sufi order. In the words of an Egyptian colleague, it's a line, and if you go to a proper Sufi khanqa, you see that spiritual line extending down from God Almighty to the current Sheikh. In this case, they used it to create a superstructure to accommodate various kinds of world religions into their order. And finally, what Tanvir said, I too have the belief that this was not built as a set of shrines. It was something else, and people got buried there later. And it preserves for us a multi-faith religious pluralistic legacy of a Sufi order, which is celebrated with this archetype. And in today's world, it's a completely indigenous new archetype if it can be classified. And if my colleagues or my peers do classify it, I think the three of us should write the big book on what this means for us. Thank you.
He did speak, Simon said he did sort of come yesterday and we had a discussion. These monuments, of course, as you have seen both from what Yasmin's been saying and what Hasan's been saying, are ones that need to be looked at in more detail, because what is emerging is that the architecture of the subcontinent is not purely Islamic. It's actually a much more complex environment, and I think we should perhaps, I don't know what you feel, Yasmin, but I think perhaps this is the beginning of us looking at it in a different light. Hasan?
Monuments. And what has happened to Bawal Halim's tomb, all this evidence will go, So, we want to know how do we save these, because that is very important.
Yes, it's to save them and to understand them and to really see people like that.
So I never thought there was anybody else in the world who believed or came across what I did. It's only when Saima forced us into a meeting yesterday that I found out that Tanvir has observed the same phenomena, but in a different kind of architecture. So it's all tying up somewhere. But I mean, Yasmin auntie, especially you, Tanvir, check the mihrabs, because I have 2 examples wo jhoot nahi boli tasveer mummy ke sath maine khud kharidi thi. But even if you get 3 or 4 more examples, if not all of them, of this complete north, south, east, west alignment, then it's not. This is a different archetype.
Yeah, I think that is true of all these monuments.
Yeah, it's true of all shrine. We have to. In fact, it's worth going back to look. But okay. I find the tomb of Saidan Shah quite interesting, and perhaps you should go and have a look at it as well.
No, absolutely. And your work from Balochistan, the Zoroastrian aspect, which is also very prominent in this, is something that needs to come out to understand what these people were thinking. Obviously, they were doing this for a long time, right, Tanvir? I mean, they were doing this for hundreds of years.
And
yeah.
the use of the form is not simply because, उसने किया तो फिर मैं भी कर लेता हूँ. But I think there was a reason why this particular form of the stepped building was used, the decorative motifs were used, and I think we just we've not analyzed them in sufficient detail. And yet we have all the evidence before, as Yasmin says, it gets destroyed.
Yeah. Has anyone looked at those tombs in Sindh?
No.
In Aroor?
No.
In Aroor? No, I not looked at the Aroor.
When Saima forced us into a meeting yesterday, that I found out that Tanvir has observed the same phenomena, but in a different kind of architecture. So it's all tying up somewhere. But I mean, Yasmin auntie, especially you, Tanvir, check the mihrabs, because I have 2 examples wo jhoot nahi bol rahi tasveer mummy ke sath maine khud kharidi thi. But even if you get 3 or 4 more examples, if not all of them, of this complete north, south, east, west alignment, then it's not. This is a different architect.
Yeah, I think that is true of all these monuments.
Yeah,
That's
it's true of all shrine. We have to. In fact, it's worth going back to it. But
Okay.
I find the tomb of Saidan Shah quite interesting, and perhaps you should go and have a look at it as well.
No, absolutely. And your work from Balochistan, the Zoroastrian aspect, which is also very prominent in this, is something that needs to come out. To understand what these people were thinking. Obviously, they were doing this for a long time, right, Tanvir? And they were doing this for hundreds of years.
And
yeah.
the use of the form is not simply because, उसने किया तो फिर मैं भी कर लेता हूँ. But I think there was a reason why this particular form of the stepped building was used, the decorative motifs were used, and I think we just we've not analyzed them in sufficient detail. And yet we have all the evidence before, as Yasmin says, it gets destroyed.
Yeah. Has anyone looked at those tombs in Sindh?
No.
In Aroor?
No.
In Aroor? No, I not looked at the Aroor tombs.
Well, I think someone has to do that because they're the beginning of the whole thing,
It could be, but your work in Lal Mohra, they are the same, and they're 2 centuries earlier, and they have hexagrams and mihrabs on the crosses on the mihrab. So they're not doing this just for fun. They probably had a ritualistic use, But the fact of the matter, Yasmin auntie, that you have royal architects building Sultan Ali Akbar and his mother's mausoleum, who would connect it to Akbar's court, means that Akbar's Ibadat Khana was essentially the same thing, which hasn't survived. And they were doing the same thing. He was just calling all these various guys to have these religious, philosophical discussions on Deen Ilahi.
Luckily, his is in India, so it will be saved.
No, but Ibadat Khana doesn't exist. Apparently. I don't know. That's what I read.
Have you looked at any of the poetry that comes out of that?
No, not yet.
Because I think the symbolism of architecture quite often reflected in poetry.
And you also mentioned Humayun's tomb, right?
Yeah.
And Tughlaq's tomb, which are
Yeah.
also like this.
Yeah. Well, most of the tombs in the subcontinent, the entrance is from the south. It's not from the east, which is what it is in the rest of the Islamic world. And I think that is the fact that all our tombs are on a plinth, that their entrance is from the south. I think this is unique. And we've been subsumed by the sort of Western understanding that all Islamic architecture in the subcontinent came from Iran. And I think as new evidence is emerging, it's much deeper. The connection between...
I read somewhere that it's come from Uzbekistan.
Well, I don't know that... I think if you look at Balochistan and the tombs that we've shown, yes, I'm sure that there was a movement, but we have enough local evidence of early buildings. And I think we don't look at that sufficiently. We always jump.
You know why I think that Bahawali is older than Bibi Javandi? Because Bibi Javandi's tiles are wedged at the back, and Bahawali is flat.
Yes, I think Bahawal Halim is much later, and yet, if you say this, क्या कहते हैं कि किसकी tomb है? Bahawal Halim is one of the original. Bibi Javandi is his descendant.
Bahawal Halim was Jahangar's teacher, apparently.
And then Bibi Javandi comes after.
Yeah.
So I think that in itself is incorrect.
No, you're absolutely right. This was not meant to be a funerary complex. They got buried there later. चलो किसी को दफना दो.
Yeah, so it's this sort of... anyway, I think I think we should bring this conversation to a close. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that Al-Aqsa was the first Qibla. It was later that Mecca became the Qibla.
No, you're
and there is a masjid which has in Mecca, Medina actually, in Medina, which has two mihrabs. One faces Al-Aqsa, and I've been there. It's called Masjid Qiblatan. We need two Qiblas. So this was, Al-Aqsa was the first Qibla.
Okay.
In the Prophet's lifetime.
No, it's just like when you come out of grad school, you're a little unsure, and this can be contentious stuff. Now I've grown up a little bit, so I'm not that scared. But, no, but like we spoke with Saima, यहाँ जो हमारा नमाज का होता है 45 दर्जे क़िबले के डायरेक्शन में हो तो वो लीगल होती है. So it's not such a big violation. It's only an 8-degree violation. It can work for both purposes. अगर वो नॉर्वे में बनाते हैं तो फिर मसला हो जाता है. लेकिन यहाँ तो the access is just, you're almost looking the same way.
Thank you.
So I think what we learn from this, or what we have discussed today, is the fact that we A, don't look after our buildings properly and therefore we destroy evidence, and B, that the evidence that we have should be analysed a little bit more syncretically than we have so far been doing, and that we have crafts and arts which we really don't even know we had because we've never really looked at them in any detail. So I hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and I will hand over to Hanan.
In the Mediterranean and in Anatolia, when they came across the same kind, nothing is absolutely similar, of conflict about what the significance of the entrance doorway is in these monuments, they discovered that if they correlated in prehistory, for prehistoric monuments, if they correlated, if you remember that in Babylonia and earlier, the map of the skies and of the stars was very clearly known, and of planetary configurations. They discovered that if they work with the position of the planets and the stars in the night sky as coordinated or measured in prehistory and in early civilizations, they came at a very close understanding of these entrances. So, given the position of the Indus Valley civilization, and much older than that, Mehergarh, and the existence of tombs in Kharan, which Yasmin has pointed out, and so has Tanvir, I think that we could perhaps jog the memories of our three geniuses, our three magi, for the new nativity. This new nativity is called the 25th birthday of Mohatta Palace. We might come up with some interesting, startling conclusions, but I'm not going to add to that. The only thing I was disappointed in is I've been learning from a long time, and it's obviously wrong because Hasan Ali Khan has not mentioned it, that the main Shah Rukn Alam tomb was built originally for the commander of Multan facing the Mughal army. Remember, Multan in the Indus was the frontier where the Mongols congregated from all the banners and presented a threat. Their raids on Delhi, their raids on the Punjab are well known and well documented. And I was told that Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, the founder of the dynasty, was the head of the Multan army and became the emperor by choice of the courtiers in Delhi and the mullahs, dare I say. And this tomb of Rukn Alam, which Rukn Alam subsequently occupied, was built for him. And after he left for Multan, of course, he died rather disastrously because when Muhammad bin Tughlaq built a pavilion for him in somewhere in South Delhi, in one of the Tughlaq citadels, that pavilion collapsed and he was killed. And Muhammad bin Tughlaq, who subsequently died in Sindh and was buried for a short while in Sevan before the body was taken back. Seems the center of history moves and all these factors come into play, but I'm sure the three wise magi will come to a wiser conclusion. But now for the music, and I will ask the speakers who wish to go and sit down there, particularly Yasmin, who has made a heroic effort to come to us because her work has been so long-standing. Tanvir has come all the way from London, and whatever Hasan Ali Khan tells you, he's a total fake. He comes across as confident and communicative. He has hidden and run away from many public lectures in Karachi, and so we're proud to have all three of them. They're genuine experts. Ladies and gentlemen, a wonderful round of applause for them. Before we come to the final item, the brief recital. Of course, chronology always goes for a walk in these contexts, and the period of music we are speaking of, we don't know its medieval origins, and they probably lie closer to the Dhurpadi style, but by the 16th and 17th century, the Sindhi Multani Kafi predominates in this region, and we have Aadu Bhagat today, and he's going to sing some short kafis, starting with the first one, which is one by Darya Khan, Aukanga, and it speaks about the mystical relationship between the Sufi and the crow.
सिख मारू वड़न जी ओ मारू वड़न जी सांगी अड़न जी आओ कंगा कर गाल मुके सिख मारू वड़न जी आओ कंगा
Sound. The next kafi is a famous Ghulam Farid kafi. Ghulam Farid is one of the Sufi saint poets of this region who is best known. Kadi Mandir, Kadi Masjid. The divergence between the two religions and their points of commonality should amuse you.
असां सफरी लोग फकीर से असां रख दूं फकर मकाम किथा असां फिर दूं यार दी गोद दे विच सब अमदे चैन आराम किथा असां यार दी यारी च मस्त रहूं गम किथा बेगाम किथा असां खादिम रोज़ मुसाफिर हूं सारी फजर किथा सारी शाम किथा कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर हूँ कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर हूँ कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर हूँ असा सोबत मस्त कलंदर कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर हूँ असा सूफी मस्त कलंदर कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर कदी चोर बनूं कदी जार बनूं कदी तोबा त गवार बनूं कदी जाहिद अददकार बनूं कदी जाहिद अददकार बनूं कदी जाहिद अददकार बनूं कदी विल्क बजूरे अंदर हूं असा सोबत मस्त कलंदर कदी मस्जिद हूं कदी मंदिर हूं कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर हूँ कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर हूँ कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर असा सोबत मस्त कलंदर कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर हूँ असा सोबत मस्त कलंदर कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर बलवा तू समझ फरीद लाकर महद नशर शदीद भला ये चालों चाल पदीद भला ये चालों चाल पदीद भला ये चालों चाल पदीद भला तुम्हें सारे कोटी उतारिया ससो बदमस्त कलंदर कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी मंदिर हूँ असा सूफी मस्त कलंदर कदी मस्जिद हूँ कदी
Another variation on the theme that I think Hasan Ali Khan brought up, the proliferation of religions in this region. Bulle Shah, Satya Jhagada Masjid Bandarda, another great saint whose work is sung throughout this region.
सट झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सिख तौर तरीक कलंदर दा सट झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सिख तौर तरीक कलंदर 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 दा सट झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सिख तौर तरीक कलंदर दा सट झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सिख तौर तरीक कलंदर दा रिंदां वाली चाली तू दे आपको आप निकाली तू हला मियां सिख रिंदां वाली चाली तू दे आपको आप निकाली तू बण फलक मुल्क दा वाली तू बण फलक मुल्क दा वाली तू ए शहर न कावण बंदर दा सड़ झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सख्ताओ तरी कलंदर दा सड़ झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सख्ताओ तरी कलंदर दा रख एक ते नाल परीत बुला रब नाल सजी रख नीत बुला ओ बुलिया बुलिया रख एक ते नाल परीत बुला रब नाल सजी रख नीत बुला कट गायर ख्याल नीत बुला कट गायर ख्याल नीत बुला पहुंचो न होत पितंबर दा सड़ झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सिखताओ तरी कलंदर दा सिखताओ तरी कलंदर दा सिखताओ तरी कलंदर दा सड़ झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सिखताओ तरी कलंदर दा सड़ झगड़ा मस्जिद मंदिर दा सिखताओ तरी कलंदर दा सिखताओ तरी कलंदर.
Just a short tribute to the musicians. They have come today to Mohatta Palace from all over southern Pakistan. Aadu Bhagat himself on the Yaktara and Chapri lives in Rahim Yar Khan and hails from Cholistan. His son Raja Bhagat lives in Cholistan and plays the Manjira. Salim Bhatt is from Rahim Yar Khan on the Dholak. And of course, the southern Sindh variants which define the synthesis between the Sindhi Multani Kafi, between central and southern Indus. Talib Hussain from Hyderabad on the banjo and Shahid Raza from Hyderabad on the harmonium. So they've come from all over the country. The last song, the last Kafi today is part of the Siraiki ensemble or repertoire of Kafis we are singing for you today through Aadu Bhagat. We've been to Bulle Shah, we've been to Ghulam Farid, and now we end with one of our favorite kafis. It is Sachal Sarmas, the Saraiki poet, or the poet of the Hafs Zaban, apart from Saraiki, in Upper Sindh, and his great kafi, Aya Mukh Vekhan. I have come to see your face, my beloved.
गुंड खोल दीदार करावो मैं आया मुख देखण गुंड खोल दीदार करावो मैं आया मुख देखण आया मुख देखण आया मुख देखण आया मुख देखण गुंड खोल दीदार करावो मैं आया मुख देखण गुण खोल दीदार करावो मैं आया मुख देखण पापा दे पैरां विच कड़ियां पापा दे पैरां विच कड़ियां ओ पापा दे पैरां विच कड़ियां पापा दे पैरां विच कड़ियां पायल कू चमकावो मैं आया मुख देखण आए पायल नू चमकावो मैं आया मुख देखण आया मुख देखण आया मुख देखण आया मुख देखण आए गुंड खोल दीदार करावो मैं आया मुख देखण आए गुंड खोल दीदार करावो मैं आया मुख देखण हाल सकलता वो मालूम तैनू हाल सकलता मालूम तैनू हाल सकलता वो मालूम तैनू अल्लाह लगी ते अल्लाह में आया मुखवे अल्लाह लगी ते अल्लाह में आया मुख वेखण 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 घुट खोल दीदार करावो मैं आया मुख वेखण घुट खोल दीदार करावो मैं आया मुख
Thank you to Aadu Bhagat and his companions who came to entertain you tonight. All of these lectures, wherever we can do it, is always to correlate the aesthetics of the cultural area we're speaking about between music, archaeology, pottery, history, and whatever we can put together. Thank you so much for coming, and as Yasmin Askari has prepared tea for us, I am told, please move to the right and refresh yourselves for a little while before you leave.
Hamid is always a very hard act to follow, as I keep saying. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. We are delighted to have you all here with us this evening. Tanvir Hasan, Yasmin Cheema and Hasan Ali Khan have talked to us about our built heritage that predates the foundation of our country. Some of our speakers have traveled distances to be with us and with you, and we are doubly grateful to them and to you for your support and your enthusiasm. I would like to thank each and every one of you for your continuing interest in our lecture series, which celebrates our 25th anniversary, as we try to create a sense of vibrancy in the city. May I please, as Hamid said, invite you to join us for a gentle cup of tea. Thank you.